My husband handed me his phone to choose dinner. Then a message appeared. I hate when you go quiet after you're with her. He called it a coworker. But an old tablet showed me who sent it, his sister. So I copied every message and waited for him to come home. Grant and I had been married for 6 years. Until that night, I thought I understood the worst thing that had ever happened to him. About a year into our relationship, he told me that something inappropriate had happened between him and his older sister, Vera, when they were teenagers. We were sitting in his car outside my apartment after dinner. I had asked why he barely spoke to Vera when his mother often described them as inseparable growing up. Grant went quiet. His hands tightened around the steering wheel, and then he started crying. He said Vera was 5 years older and had controlled him during a period when their parents were rarely home. She discouraged him from having friends, convinced him nobody understood him the way she did, and crossed boundaries he had been too young to recognize. According to Grant, it ended before he left home. He looked ashamed and frightened, like saying it aloud might change how I saw him. I told him it wouldn't. I encouraged him to speak with a therapist. He went for several months, then stopped because he said discussing it made everything worse. When I suggested finding someone else, he asked me not to push. After that, I treated anything involving Vera carefully. If Grant left the room when she called, I gave him privacy. If he seemed unsettled after a family gathering, I didn't interrogate him. Vera lived several hours away, so I rarely saw her. She was polite whenever we met, but the intensity between them made me uncomfortable. She used a childhood nickname nobody else was allowed to use. She touched his shoulder or arm whenever she spoke to him and constantly brought up memories that excluded everyone else. At our wedding, Vera cried through most of the ceremony. Grant said weddings made her emotional because she believed she would never have one of her own. I accepted it because questioning her behavior felt like questioning what Grant had survived. For most of our marriage, he claimed they spoke only occasionally. He said Vera still carried guilt and refused to discuss the past directly. Then the message appeared on his phone. I hate when you go quiet after you're with her. The contact was saved as a single letter, V. Grant crossed the kitchen and took the phone from my hand before I could open the conversation. Who sent that? I asked. A woman from work. She's having problems with her boyfriend. Why does she care when you're with me? She gets attached to people who help her. That's all. I asked him to show me the conversation. His face tightened. You don't trust me? That message didn't sound professional. You're making it into something because of what I told you about Vera. I hadn't mentioned his sister. When I pointed that out, he shook his head and said, You promised you wouldn't use my trauma against me. That sentence stopped me. He had shared something deeply painful, and now he was accusing me of turning it into evidence against him. I felt ashamed before I had time to examine whether his explanation made sense. I apologized. Grant pulled me into his arms, kissed my forehead, and suggested we forget about ordering dinner and cook together. For the next week, he was unusually attentive. He brought home flowers, planned a weekend away, and made the pasta dish he used to cook when we first started dating. The affection should have reassured me. Instead, it felt like an attempt to close the subject. A few days later, my laptop stopped charging. I remembered an old tablet we had used during a road trip and found it inside a box in our bedroom closet. I plugged it in and left it charging while I did laundry. When it turned on, Grant's accounts were still connected. The same messaging app opened automatically. The recent conversation with V now showed a profile picture. It was Vera. My first instinct was to close the app. I knew reading private messages crossed a line. Then I saw the most recent exchange. Vera had written, She almost saw everything because you got careless. Grant replied, I handled it. She feels guilty now. I sat on the floor beside the bed and opened the conversation. There were years of messages. They weren't graphic, but there was no innocent way to read them. They spoke like two people maintaining a secret relationship. Vera complained whenever Grant spent weekends with me. She mocked our anniversary trips and called me the arrangement. Grant repeatedly assured her that marriage had changed nothing between them. In one message, she asked whether he regretted marrying me. Grant answered, It made everything easier. People stopped watching us. I kept reading. Several work conferences Grant claimed to have attended over the previous 2 years had actually been trips with Vera. They met in different cities, stayed in the same hotels, and coordinated their arrivals so nobody would see them together. Whenever Grant returned, he brought me something small from the airport. A candle, a mug, a box of candy. I had taken those gifts as proof that he thought about me while he was gone. The messages also showed that he had shared private details about our marriage with her. Our arguments, our finances, and conversations about whether we should have children. Vera once wrote, "You can't have a baby with her. Then you'll never be free." Grant replied, "I know. I keep delaying it." For almost 2 years, he had told me he wanted children, but believed we needed more savings first. The tablet showed me that my patience had been built around promises he never intended to keep. I copied the messages involving the trips, the money, and their discussions about our marriage. I also photographed the screen with my phone in case Grant deleted the account and claimed I had invented everything. Then I placed the tablet on the kitchen table and waited. Grant came home a little after 6. He called my name from the entryway, walked into the kitchen, and stopped when he saw it. His face lost all color. "Are you still in a relationship with your sister?" I asked. He looked at the tablet. "You went through my private messages? Answer me." He said I had misunderstood conversations taken out of context. I asked what context could explain Vera calling me an arrangement or Grant saying our marriage stopped people from watching them. He sat down slowly. "It isn't what you think." "What do I think?" "That we're having some kind of affair." "Are you?" Grant rubbed both hands over his face and said nothing physical had happened during our marriage. I asked why I should believe that when he had lied about the messages and the trips. He accused me of invading his privacy and treating him like a criminal. He said Vera was emotionally dependent on him and that he had been trying to manage her without causing another breakdown. I reminded him that he had traveled with her, paid for hotels, and reassured her that marrying me had changed nothing. His anger disappeared. He started crying and said Vera was the only person who understood what their childhood had been like. According to him, their relationship did not fit into normal categories, and outsiders always forced ugly labels onto something they could never understand. "Do you love her romantically?" I asked. He looked away. "Then why did you marry me?" "I do love you." That wasn't my question. Grant said he wanted a normal life. He wanted a home, a wife, and people who didn't look at him like something was wrong with him. He insisted that didn't make our marriage fake. I asked whether Vera knew that was why he married me. He nodded. That small admission hurt more than another denial. I told him to leave the house. Grant refused. We owned it together, and he said I couldn't throw him out because I was upset. "You used our marriage to hide what you were doing." "I didn't use you. You told her marrying me made people stop watching you." "I was trying to calm her down." "You discussed having children with me while promising her it would never happen." Grant stood and accused me of twisting everything into the most disgusting version possible. I realized he still believed the central problem was how I interpreted his choices. I packed enough clothes for several days and called Daisy. Grant followed me through the house, moving between apologies and warnings. He said I was too emotional to make decisions. He said nobody would understand if I told them, and his parents would never survive the humiliation. At the door, he lowered his voice. "You promised you would protect me." "I promised to protect the person you said you were." Then I left. Daisy picked me up without asking questions. She saw my suitcase, looked at my face, and told me I could stay as long as I needed. Grant called repeatedly that night. When I stopped answering, he sent messages saying we needed to discuss everything calmly before I made a mistake that couldn't be repaired. Near midnight, he wrote, "Vera and I survived things you will never understand. Please don't punish us for surviving." The next morning, Vera called me. Her voice was calm. She said Grant was in a fragile condition and that leaving after forcing him to revisit his past was cruel. "Are you still romantically involved with my husband?" I asked. "That isn't a useful way to describe our bond." "Then describe it." "We are the only people who understand what happened in that house." "Did you share hotel rooms with him during our marriage?" Vera paused before saying the trips were private because people judged them unfairly. According to her, they needed time together to process their childhood without outside pressure. I asked why Grant had used our joint account to pay for those trips. Her tone hardened. "You're reducing everything to money because that's easier than admitting you never really knew him." I ended the call. Grant messaged less than a minute later, accusing me of upsetting her. That was when I contacted Clara. I brought her screenshots, bank statements, and a list of the dates Grant claimed he had been traveling for work. Clara told me to preserve everything, change my personal passwords, and stop discussing the separation by phone. The money Grant had spent wasn't enough to destroy us financially, but it was more than I expected. Flights, hotels, restaurant charges, and gifts added up to several $1,000s. Some expenses were hidden inside cash withdrawals or mixed with legitimate travel, but the messages connected enough of them to Vera. Clara explained that the spending would not decide the entire divorce, but it mattered because Grant had used marital funds while deceiving me. Since we jointly owned the house, neither of us could simply force the other out without an agreement. Clara advised me to remain with Daisy until the immediate conflict settled. For the next 2 weeks, Grant moved between remorse and blame. He begged me to attend counseling, then accused me of violating him by reading the messages. He offered to stop seeing Vera, but later changed the promise to limiting contact because cutting her off would supposedly endanger her mental health. I asked him whether he had ever intended to choose our marriage. "Why are you forcing me to choose between my wife and my family?" he replied. I filed for divorce. Grant's mother, Nora, called the evening he received the papers. She understood why I was leaving but refused to say the reason directly. She called it the situation and old family wounds. Nora asked me not to tell anyone. She said Paul's heart condition had worsened and public humiliation could put him in the hospital. She reminded me that Grant had been young when everything started and that Vera had never received proper help. I told her I wasn't planning to post anything online or contact extended relatives. Then she asked me to reconsider the divorce. She said Grant needed stability and that ending the marriage would push him back toward Vera. So I'm supposed to stay married to him to keep him away from his sister? That isn't what I meant. It is exactly what you meant. Nora said families sometimes survived terrible things by refusing to destroy one another over them. Grant already destroyed our marriage. I'm refusing to pretend it still exists. Even then, I kept the reason private. I told Daisy and Clara because I needed support and legal advice. Everyone else received the same explanation. Grant and I were separating because of serious dishonesty. Grant chose a different approach. He began telling people I had abandoned him after learning about trauma from his childhood. He left out the recent messages, the secret trips, and the money. In his version, he had trusted his wife with something deeply painful, and I responded by invading his privacy and filing for divorce. I didn't know what he was saying until Jade, a mutual friend, sent me a long message. She said she understood that marriage could become overwhelming, but leaving someone because of abuse they suffered as a teenager was cruel. She said Grant had trusted me with his deepest shame, and I had punished him for it. I wanted to ignore her. Clara had warned me that public arguments could make the divorce uglier. But Grant was using the same story that had once earned my compassion to turn people against me. I replied with 2 screenshots. The first showed Vera calling me temporary and Grant assuring her that our marriage changed nothing between them. The second showed them planning a hotel trip during a week Grant claimed to be attending a work event. I added 1 sentence. This did not end when they were teenagers. Jade called immediately. I didn't answer, but she sent an apology and admitted Grant had lied to her. 3 more people contacted me that week. Each had heard the same version from him. I sent them the same limited evidence. I didn't publish anything or share intimate details. I showed only enough to prove the relationship had continued during our marriage. Then I sent those screenshots to Nora and Paul. I explained that Grant was spreading a false account of the divorce, and I would not accept being portrayed as someone who abandoned an abuse survivor. Nora called within minutes. "You promised to keep this private." I promised not to expose him. I didn't promise to let him lie about me. She accused me of seeking revenge. Maybe anger influenced my decision, but I hadn't contacted his relatives, coworkers, or neighbors. I responded only to people Grant had already brought into the situation. Paul didn't call. He sent a short message saying he was sorry and needed time to understand what he had seen. Reed, Grant's younger brother, contacted me 2 days later and asked to meet. We sat in a quiet coffee shop. Reed looked exhausted before we began talking. He said he had suspected something was wrong for years. When they were younger, Grant and Vera disappeared together during family gatherings. If one of them dated someone, the other became hostile. Reed had once found them asleep in the same bed as adults, fully clothed, and Grant became furious when questioned. Reed never had proof that anything continued into adulthood. He told himself their behavior came from whatever happened when they were young, and that confronting them would make everything worse. "I should have said something before the wedding," he said. "What could you have told me when you weren't sure?" "That I was worried." "At least you would have known you weren't imagining it." Several members of Grant's family had noticed enough to feel uneasy, yet nobody warned me. They protected the family's comfort by allowing me to enter the marriage without the information they were afraid to confront. After the screenshots circulated, Nora and Paul stopped speaking to Grant and Vera. Reed did the same. Grant blamed me for destroying his family. He said I had taken the most complicated and painful part of his life and reduced it to evidence in a divorce. He accused me of proving Vera right that outsiders could never be trusted. You're still worried about her trust, I told him. You haven't said anything about what you did to mine. Our attorneys eventually arranged for Grant to move out while the house was prepared for sale. He could have rented an apartment nearby. Instead, he moved in with Vera. I expected the news to devastate me. Instead, it ended the last argument he could make. After months of insisting I misunderstood their relationship, moving into her home was the first honest decision he had made. The divorce took longer than I wanted, but there was no dramatic courtroom battle. The financial records helped settle the dispute over the money he had spent, and we divided what remained. I kept the old tablet until the last document was signed. After the divorce became official, Grant sent one final personal message. He wrote that he hoped I was satisfied. His parents no longer spoke to him, Reed ignored his calls, and several friends had stepped away. He said I had taken a private tragedy and turned it into a weapon. I started writing a response, then deleted it. What happened to Grant when he was young may not have been his fault. The lies he told during our marriage were choices. He used our money to maintain a secret relationship, let me plan a future he had already promised Vera would never happen, and then used his past to make me look cruel for leaving. I still don't know whether sharing the screenshots was justice or revenge. I could have stayed silent and allowed people to believe him. The divorce would have continued, and his family might still be speaking to him. But silence had protected Grant and Vera for years. I was done paying the price for it. The house sold last month. I moved into a smaller place and bought a new dining table because I didn't want the one where the tablet had been waiting when Grant came home. Sometimes I miss the man I thought I married. Then I remember that he existed inside a story Grant carefully built for me. I don't hate him, and I don't forgive him. I'm simply no longer carrying the secret that kept him comfortable while it destroyed me. Was I wrong for showing people the messages after Grant lied about why I left? Or did he give up his right to privacy when he used that privacy to ruin my reputation?